in a small village nestled among rolling hills where the morning mist clung to the thatched roofs and the scent of wood smoke filled the air, there lived a girl named Adana. From the very moment she drew her first breath, Adana's life was marked by a shadow of sorrow and rejection that would follow her like a relentless ghost. Adana's mother, Nkechi, had been beloved in the village, her laughter like music, her kindness a balm to all who knew her. But fate can be cruel, and as Nkechi labored to bring her child into the world, complications arose. The village midwife worked tirelessly, her weathered hands moving with the skill of decades. But it was not enough. As the first rays of dawn broke over the hills, Nkechi's life slipped away, even as her daughters began. Adana's father, Emeka, was a man broken by grief. Where once he had stood tall and proud, now he slouched as if carrying an invisible burden. He could not bear to look at the child who had, in his eyes, stolen his beloved wife from him. Each time he caught a glimpse of Adana's face, so like her mother's, pain lanced through his heart anew. Unable to care for the child and unwilling to face the daily reminder of his loss, Emeka made a decision that would shape Adana's life. On a misty morning, just days after her birth, he bundled the infant in a worn blanket and carried her to his mother's hut on the outskirts of the village. Adana's grandmother, Obiageli, was a stern woman carved from the hardships of life. Her face was a map of wrinkles, each line etched by some past struggle or loss. When Emeka placed the baby in her arms, Obiageli's eyes narrowed, seeing not a grandchild to cherish, but another mouth to feed in times already lean. "You bring me this burden, my son?" Obiageli's voice was as rough as the bark of the old baobab tree. "Have I not given enough to this family?" Emeka's shoulders sagged further. "Mother, I cannot look at her without seeing Nkechi. Please, I beg you." For a long moment, Obiageli said nothing, her gaze moving from her broken son to the infant in her arms. Finally, she nodded once, sharply. "Go then. But know this, the child will earn her keep." And so began Adana's life under her grandmother's roof. As the years passed, Adana grew from a quiet infant to a solemn child, her large eyes taking in a world that seemed to have no place for her. Obiageli was not cruel, but neither was she kind. Adana learned early that affection was not something to be expected, that every morsel of food and scrap of clothing had to be earned through hard work. By the age of 5, Adana's small hands were already calloused from the endless chores, fetching water from the stream, gathering firewood, helping to pound cassava into flour. While other children played in the dusty village square, their laughter carrying on the breeze, Adana worked in silence, stealing glances at the life that seemed forever out of reach. It was not just the work that set Adana apart. As she grew, it became clear that she bore an uncanny resemblance to her late mother. The other villagers would whisper as she passed, their eyes following her with a mix of pity and superstition. Some even crossed themselves, as if warding off an evil spirit. The children, cruel in the way that only the young can be, sensed Adana's otherness like sharks scenting blood in the water. They turned her difference into a weapon, using it to cut her deeper than any physical blow could. "Unwanted child," they would taunt, their voices high and mocking. "Ghost girl, your own father couldn't stand the sight of you." At first, Adana tried to ignore them, to hold her head high as her grandmother had taught her. But day after day, week after week, the words chipped away at her resolve. Stones followed the taunts, small at first, then larger as the children grew bolder in their cruelty. One particularly harsh day when the sun beat down mercilessly and tempers ran short, the taunting escalated. A boy named Chukwu, known for his quick temper and quicker fists, decided that words were not enough. As Adana walked past, her arms laden with firewood, Chukwu stuck out his foot. Adana tumbled to the ground, the wood scattering around her. Laughter erupted from the gathered children, a sound that seemed to pierce Adana's very soul. As she struggled to her feet, her knees bleeding and her eyes stinging with unshed tears, Chukwu's voice rose above the others. "Look at the ghost girl. Can't even walk properly. Maybe if you died instead of your mother, someone would actually want you." Something snapped inside Adana. With a cry that was part rage, part anguish, she launched herself at Chukwu. Her small fists flew, connecting with his surprised face. For a moment, the other children fell silent, shocked by this unexpected turn of events. Then chaos erupted. Chukwu, recovering from his surprise, fought back. Other children joined in, some trying to separate the two, others simply adding to the fray. By the time the adults arrived to break up the fight, Adana's lip was split, her eyes swelling, but a fierce light burned in her gaze. The consequences were swift and harsh. Obiageli, her face a mask of cold fury, dragged Adana back to their hut. The beating that followed was severe, but it was the words that cut deepest. "Ungrateful child," Obiageli hissed. "I take you in, feed you, clothe you, and this is how you repay me? By bringing shame to this family? Your mother would be disgusted if she could see you now." That night, curled up on her thin pallet, her body aching and her heart even more so, Adana made a decision. She could not stay here, in this place where every face held judgment, where every word was a sharp reminder of her unwanted status. In the days that followed, Adana began to prepare. She squirreled away bits of food when she could, wrapping them carefully in a piece of cloth she'd mended countless times. She watched the adults more closely, listening to their conversations about the world beyond the village, and she found her sanctuary. Hidden beyond a thicket of thorny bushes, Adana discovered a small grove near the river. Here, the sound of the water drowned out the echoes of cruel words. The dappled sunlight through the leaves seemed to wash away the stares and whispers. In this place, Adana could breathe, could imagine a life beyond the confines of her grandmother's hut and the village's judgment. It was in this grove, on a day when the weight of her existence seemed particularly heavy, that Adana's life took an unexpected turn. As she sat by the river, tears streaming down her face, a rustling in the bushes caught her attention. Adana tensed, ready to flee. But what emerged was not another tormenting child or disapproving adult. An old woman stepped into the clearing, her white hair gleaming in the sunlight, her dark skin wrinkled like the bark of an ancient tree. Her eyes, though, were sharp and clear, seeming to look right through Adana. "Why do you cry, child?" the old woman asked, her voice surprisingly gentle. Perhaps it was the kindness in the stranger's tone, so unfamiliar to Adana's ears. Perhaps it was simply that the dam of her emotions could no longer hold. Whatever the reason, Adana found herself pouring out her heart, telling this unknown woman of her loneliness, her pain, the constant feeling of being unwanted and unloved. The old woman listened silently, her eyes never leaving Adana's face. When at last the torrent of words slowed, she reached out a gnarled hand and cupped Adana's cheek. "Your life will change, Adana," the old woman said, and Adana started at the use of her name, which she had never spoken. "But first, you must leave this place. The path ahead will not be easy, but it is yours to walk. Remember, child, The unwanted seed often grows into the strongest tree. With those cryptic words, the old woman turned and disappeared back into the bushes, leaving Adana wide-eyed and wondering if she had imagined the entire encounter. But as the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Adana felt something she had not experienced in years: hope. That night, as the village settled into sleep, Adana lay awake, her mind racing. The old woman's words echoed in her head, mingling with the taunts of the children, the disapproving mutters of the adults, the cold dismissal in her grandmother's eyes. As the moon rose, casting silver light through the cracks in the hut's walls, Adana made her decision. Moving silently, she gathered her meager belongings, the small pouch of food she had saved, a water skin, the clothes on her back. She hesitated for a moment by her grandmother's sleeping form, a part of her yearning for some connection, some word of farewell. But Obiageli's face, even in sleep, held no warmth. Adana turned away. The night air was cool on her skin as Adana slipped out of the hut. The village was silent, save for the distant bark of a dog and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. As she reached the edge of the village, Adana paused, looking back at the only home she had ever known. In that moment, memories washed over her. Fleeting moments of laughter snatched in secret, the rare occasions when her grandmother's hand had rested on her head in something almost like affection, the simple joy of feeling the earth beneath her bare feet. For a heartbeat, doubt crept in. Was she making a mistake? Could she really survive in the unknown world beyond the village? But then other memories surfaced. The sting of stones against her skin, the bite of cruel words, the constant gnawing feeling of being unwanted. Adana's resolve hardened. Whatever lay ahead, it had to be better than this half-life of rejection and pain. With a deep breath that seemed to fill her entire being, Adana turned her back on the sleeping village. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, the future uncertain. But as she took her first steps into the unknown, Adana felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not quite happiness, not yet, but the fluttering wings of possibility. And so, under the watchful eyes of the stars, Adana began her journey. The unwanted child was leaving the only world she knew, stepping into a future that held both promise and peril. What adventures awaited her? What challenges would she face? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Adana's story was far from over. It was, in many ways, only just beginning. Gather round, my children, for the tale of Adana continues. Her journey, once begun, would lead her down paths both bright and dark. Listen closely, for in this chapter of her life, hope and heartbreak walk hand in hand. For days upon days, Adana walked. The sun rose and set, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. But still she pressed on. Her feet, once tough from village life, now blistered and bled. The small pouch of food she had brought from home had long since emptied, and hunger gnawed at her belly like a restless beast. As she trudged along dusty roads and through thick forests, Adana's mind often wandered back to the village she had left behind. Had anyone noticed her absence? Did her grandmother worry, or was she relieved to be rid of her unwanted charge? These thoughts plagued her, mingling with the growing fear that perhaps she had made a terrible mistake. On the 5th day of her journey, as the merciless sun beat down upon her, Adana's strength finally failed her. Her vision swam, the world tilting sideways as she stumbled. Just as she was about to collapse, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. The bustling outskirts of a large town, its market alive with color and sound. With the last reserves of her energy, Adana pushed forward. The scent of spices and roasted meats filled the air, making her empty stomach clench painfully. As she entered the marketplace, The noise and activity overwhelmed her senses. Traders called out their wares, haggling customers argued prices, and children darted between stalls, their laughter rising above the din. It was all too much for Adana's weakened state. Her legs gave way, and she crumpled to the ground near a fruit stall, the world fading to black around her. When Adana's eyes fluttered open, she found herself lying on a soft pallet, a cool cloth draped across her forehead. For a moment, confusion reigned. Was this all a dream? Had she never left the village? "Ah, you're awake, child," came a warm voice. Adana turned her head to see a woman sitting nearby, her face lined with age, but her eyes twinkling with kindness. "You gave us quite a scare, collapsing like that in the marketplace." The woman introduced herself as Mama Zuri, the owner of the fruit stall where Adana had fallen. As she helped Adana sit up and drink some water, Mama Zuri's gentle questioning drew out Adana's story. Her life in the village, her decision to leave, her days of wandering. Mama Zuri listened without judgment, her expression softening with each word. When Adana finished, the older woman was quiet for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "Well, child," she said, her voice firm but kind, "it seems fate has brought you to my door. I could use some help at my stall, and you look like you could use a place to stay. What do you say we help each other out?" Adana's eyes widened, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You would do that for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama Zuri's laugh was like warm honey. "Child, in this life we must be kind when we can. Now rest. Tomorrow we begin anew." And so Adana found herself with a new home and a new purpose. The days that followed were filled with hard work, but it was work that brought joy rather than resentment. Mama Zuri proved to be not just an employer, but a mentor, and increasingly, the mother figure Adana had never known. Under Mama Zuri's tutelage, Adana flourished. She learned the art of selecting the ripest fruits, of arranging displays to catch the eye, of bargaining with both charm and firmness. But Mama Zuri's lessons extended beyond the marketplace. In the evenings, by the light of an oil lamp, she began to teach Adana to read and write. "Knowledge is power, child," Mama Zuri would say, guiding Adana's hand as she formed letters. "With words, you can shape your own destiny." Months passed, and Adana grew not just in skill, but in confidence. The scared, silent girl from the village faded away, replaced by a young woman known for her quick wit and gentle manner. Customers came to the stall not just for Mama Zuri's excellent produce, but for Adana's warm smile and clever conversation. But fate, it seemed, was not done with Adana yet. On a sweltering afternoon, as the heat shimmered above the marketplace, a disturbance rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, voices hushed, as a sleek black car pulled up to the edge of the market. It was a rare sight in these parts, a symbol of wealth and power that seemed out of place among the humble stalls. The car door opened, and out stepped a man who seemed to command attention with his very presence. Tall and handsome, dressed in a crisp suit that spoke of city life and success, he moved through the market with the confidence of one used to getting his way. This was Chidi Okafor, a name whispered with both admiration and suspicion throughout the town. A wealthy businessman from the city, Chidi had been making waves with talks of development and progress, words that excited some and terrified others. As Chidi made his way through the market, his eyes scanning the stalls with keen interest, he approached Mama Zuri's fruit stand. Adana, arranging a display of mangoes, looked up, and in that moment, something electric passed between them. Chidi's confident stride faltered for just a second, his eyes widening slightly as they met Adana's. For her part, Adana felt her breath catch, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot sun overhead. "Good afternoon," Chidi said, his voice smooth as silk. I don't believe I've had the pleasure. I'm Chidi Okafor. Adana, she replied, surprised at how steady her voice sounded despite the sudden fluttering in her stomach. Welcome to Mama Zuri's. How can I help you today? What followed was a conversation that, on the surface, was about nothing more than the quality of Mama Zuri's fruits. But beneath the words, a current of mutual fascination flowed. Chidi's eyes never left Adana's face, his smile growing warmer with each exchange. Adana, for her part, found herself sharing small jokes, delighting in the way Chidi's laughter seemed to light up his entire being. As Chidi finally took his leave, a bag of carefully selected fruits in hand, he paused. I have a feeling I'll be needing more fruit very soon, he said, his eyes twinkling. I look forward to our next meeting, Adana. In the days that followed, Chidi became a regular visitor to the market, and to Mama Zuri's stall in particular. Each time, he would find some reason to linger, engaging Adana in conversations that ranged from local gossip to dreams of the future. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, Adana and Chidi found themselves drawn to each other like moths to a flame. Chidi was fascinated by Adana's resilience and quick intelligence, while Adana was captivated by Chidi's worldliness and the gentle way he listened to her. Truly listened, in a way no one ever had before. But their budding connection did not go unnoticed. Whispers began to circulate through the market, growing louder with each of Chidi's visits. Why would a rich man like that be interested in a poor market girl? Mark my words, he's up to no good. That Adana, getting above her station, she'll learn the hard way. At first, Adana tried to ignore the whispers, to focus on the joy she felt in Chidi's presence, but doubt, that insidious enemy, began to creep into her heart. The old fears from her village life resurfaced. Was she truly worthy of happiness? Of love? Mama Zuri, ever observant, noticed the change in Adana. One evening, as they sat together after closing the stall, she broached the subject. Child, she said, her voice gentle but firm, I see the way you look at that Chidi Okafor and the way he looks at you. But I also see the doubt in your eyes. What troubles you? Adana's words came out in a rush, all her fears and insecurities pouring forth. Mama Zuri listened patiently, then took Adana's hands in her own. Adana, listen to me, she said. You are worthy of love, of happiness. Don't let the whispers of others drown out the voice of your own heart. But, she added, her expression growing serious, be careful. Listen to your instincts. They've brought you this far. Bolstered by Mama Zuri's words, Adana resolved to push aside her doubts. When Chidi next visited the market, she met his smile with one of her own, her heart soaring at the warmth in his eyes. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Chidi pulled Adana aside. Meet me by the old baobab tree tonight, he said, his voice low and urgent. There's something important I need to tell you. Excitement and nerves warred in Adana's stomach as she made her way to the meeting place that evening. The old baobab tree stood like a silent sentinel at the edge of town, its massive trunk and sprawling branches a testament to ages past. As she approached, Adana's heart leapt at the sight of Chidi's tall figure. But then she heard voices. Chidi was not alone. Instinctively, she slowed her steps, moving quietly until she could make out the words. It's just business, Chidi was saying, his voice colder than Adana had ever heard it. Once we secure the land, we'll tear down the market and build the factory. The locals will thank us in the end. Progress comes at a price. Another voice, unfamiliar and gruff, replied, And the girl? The one from the fruit stall? She suspects nothing? Chidi's laugh sent a chill down Adana's spine. Adana, please? A few kind words, a charming smile. She's putty in my hands. She'll tell us everything we need to know about the market, about who might resist. And she'll never suspect a thing. In that moment, Adana's world shattered. Every sweet word, every gentle touch. Had it all been a lie? Was she, once again, nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded? Tears blurred her vision as she turned and ran, her feet carrying her away from the baobab tree, away from Chidi, away from the dreams of love and acceptance she had foolishly allowed herself to nurture. As the night closed in around her, Adana found herself back at Mama Zuri's small house, her chest heaving with sobs. The older woman took one look at Adana's face and opened her arms, enveloping her in a warm embrace. "Oh, child," Mama Zuri murmured, stroking Adana's hair. "What has happened?" Through her tears, Adana poured out the story. Chidi's deception, the plans for the market, her own foolishness in believing she could be loved. Mama Zuri listened, her expression growing darker with each word. When Adana finished, the older woman was quiet for a long moment, then spoke, her voice filled with a strength that surprised Adana. "Listen to me, Adana," she said, taking the girl's face in her hands. "You are not foolish for opening your heart. The shame is his, not yours. But now, we have a choice to make. Do we let this break us, or do we fight?" Adana blinked, confusion mixing with her pain. "Fight? But how? Against a man like Chidi, what can we do?" Mama Zuri's smile was fierce and determined. "More than you might think, child, more than you might think. Rest now, tomorrow we plan." As Adana finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, her dreams were a chaotic mix of Chidi's betrayal and Mama Zuri's words of defiance. In the depths of her pain, a small spark of something new began to glow. Not the naive hope of before, but something stronger, more resilient. The unwanted child from the village had survived rejection and hardship. The market girl had flourished under kindness and opportunity. Now, faced with betrayal and injustice, what would Adana become? As the night deepened, the answer to that question lay waiting in the dawn to come. Adana's journey, it seemed, was far from over. In fact, it might just be truly beginning. Years had passed since that fateful night by the baobab tree. Adana, her heart shattered but her spirit unbroken, had fled the town that had briefly been her home. With nothing but the clothes on her back and the painful lessons of the past, she had made her way to the sprawling city that lay beyond the horizon. Those first days in the city had been a struggle, a test of everything Adana had learned. She slept in doorways, worked odd jobs that left her hands calloused and her back aching. But always, always, she remembered Mama Zuri's words. "Knowledge is power, child." In the quiet hours between work and sleep, Adana would sit under the harsh glow of street lamps, poring over discarded newspapers and tattered books. She taught herself about business, about finance, about the intricate dance of supply and demand that made the world turn. Months turned to years, and slowly, through sheer determination and the quick wit that had always been her strength, Adana began to climb. From a lowly clerk in a small shop, she worked her way up, impressing bosses and clients alike with her sharp mind and unwavering work ethic. By her 30th birthday, Adana had transformed herself. Gone was the scared village girl, the naive market worker. In her place stood a successful businesswoman, respected and admired in her field. She had an office high above the city streets, her name etched in gold on the door. But for all her success, Adana never forgot where she came from. The kindness Mama Zuri had shown her remained a guiding light, a reminder that true wealth lay not in money, but in compassion. Adana used her growing influence to help others, funding scholarships for underprivileged children and supporting small businesses in struggling neighborhoods. And yet, there was a hollowness in her heart that no amount of success could fill. In quiet moments, when the city's noise faded and she was left alone with her thoughts, Adana would find herself thinking of the village of her childhood, of Mama Zuri's warm smile. And yes, even of Chidi Okafor and the bitter lesson he had taught her about trust. It was on a rain-soaked Tuesday, as Adana sat in her office reviewing quarterly reports, that fate once again intervened in her life. Her assistant knocked tentatively on the door, a worried frown creasing her brow. "Ms. Adana," she said, "there's a call for you. It's from your old village." Adana's heart skipped a beat. In all these years, she had never reached out to the place of her birth, had never sought news of those who had rejected her. With a trembling hand, she picked up the phone. The news was grim. A prolonged drought had devastated the region. Crops withered in the fields, livestock grew thin and sickly. The village that had once been poor but self-sufficient now teetered on the brink of famine. The caller, a distant cousin Adana barely remembered, spoke of children with swollen bellies and old people dying in their huts. As Adana listened, a war raged within her. Part of her, the hurt child who still carried the scars of rejection, whispered that this was justice, that those who had spurned her deserved no help. But another voice, one that sounded remarkably like Mama Zuri, spoke of compassion, of the duty we owe to our fellow humans, no matter the past. For 3 days and nights, Adana wrestled with her conscience. On the morning of the 4th day, she made her decision. She would return to the village, not as the unwanted child seeking acceptance, but as a woman of means offering help. The journey back was a strange mirror of her flight years ago. But where once she had traveled on foot, hungry and afraid, now she rode in a comfortable car, its trunk laden with supplies and equipment. As the landscape grew more familiar, Adana felt a tightening in her chest, memories both bitter and sweet washing over her. The village, when she finally saw it, was a shadow of what she remembered. The drought had leached the life from the land, leaving behind a dusty, desperate place. As her car pulled into the village square, faces turned toward her, gaunt, wary faces that showed no sign of recognizing the successful woman as the rejected child they had once known. For weeks, Adana worked tirelessly. She brought in experts to implement irrigation systems, taught sustainable farming techniques that could help the villagers weather future droughts. She set up a small clinic, stocked with medicines and staffed by a young doctor from the city. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the mood in the village began to change. Hope, that most fragile of flowers, began to bloom in the arid soil of despair, and with it came recognition. Whispers started spreading from hut to hut of who this benefactor really was. "It's Adana," the whispers said, "the unwanted child. She's come back to save us all." The very people who had once cast her out now looked at Adana with a mixture of awe and shame. Some approached her, hesitantly at first, to offer awkward thanks and fumbling apologies. Adana accepted them all with a grace that surprised even herself, finding that the act of forgiveness eased something in her own heart. But the greatest test of Adana's newfound peace was yet to come. It happened on a sweltering afternoon, as Adana oversaw the construction of a new well that would bring clean water to the village center. A commotion at the edge of the work site drew her attention, and there, looking older and somehow diminished, stood a face from her past. Chidi Okafor. Time seemed to stand still as their eyes met. Adana felt as if she were suddenly back by that baobab tree, her heart breaking all over again. But she was no longer that naive girl, and the years had clearly left their mark on Chidi as well. "Adana," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've been searching for you for years." The workers and villagers faded into the background as Chidi stepped forward, his eyes never leaving Adana's face. "That night by the baobab tree," he continued, "you didn't hear the whole conversation. I was trying to stop the factory from being built. I wanted to protect the market, To protect you." Adana listened, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Chidi's words poured out in a torrent, as if he'd been holding them back for all these years. He explained how he had been working undercover, infiltrating the company that wanted to destroy the market. The conversation Adana had overheard had been part of his act, a way to gain the trust of the real villains. But by the time he had gone to meet Adana to explain everything and ask for her help in saving the market, she was gone. "I used every resource I had," Chidi said, his voice cracking. "I stopped the factory, saved the market. But by then you had vanished. I've spent years trying to find you, to make things right." As Chidi's tale unfolded, Adana felt as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted. Could it be true? Had she misunderstood so completely? The doubt must have shown on her face, for Chidi reached into his jacket and pulled out a weathered folder. "I brought proof," he said softly. "Documents, testimonies from people in the town. Mama Zuri," his voice caught. "She passed away last year, but before she did, she wrote you this." With trembling hands, Adana took the letter. Mama Zuri's familiar handwriting blurred before her eyes as tears welled up. The letter spoke of Chidi's tireless efforts to protect the market, of his desperate search for Adana. It ended with words that pierced Adana's heart. "Forgive him, child, as you have forgiven others. And in forgiving, may you both find peace." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Adana found herself at a crossroads. The hurt and betrayal of the past warred with the possibility of a future redeemed. Could she trust again? Could she open her heart to the man she had once loved? The man she had believed had betrayed her? The village held its collective breath, sensing that a moment of great importance was unfolding before them. This woman who had returned to save them, who had taught them the power of forgiveness by her very presence, now faced her own test of compassion. Adana closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the years, the pain and the triumph, the lessons learned and the wisdom hard won. When she opened them again, she saw not just Chidi before her, but the whole village. She saw the faces of those who had once rejected her, now looking to her with hope and admiration. She saw the new well, a symbol of life and renewal. And in that moment, Adana made her choice. With a deep breath, she stepped forward and took Chidi's hand. "We have much to talk about," she said softly, "and perhaps much to forgive." The tension in the air broke like a summer storm, replaced by a feeling of joy and possibility. As word spread through the village, a spontaneous celebration erupted. Drums began to beat, voices raised in song. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Adana stood hand in hand with Chidi, surrounded by the community that had once cast her out and now embraced her as their savior. She realized that her journey had come full circle, yet it was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, trust to rebuild, a future to forge. But for now, in this moment, Adana felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had faced her past, forgiven those who had hurt her, and in doing so, had freed herself. The unwanted child had become a woman of strength and compassion, a beacon of hope for an entire community. And so, my children, remember this tale. Remember that even in our darkest moments, hope can flourish. That those once rejected can rise to become the very ones who lift others up. That forgiveness, freely given, has the power to heal not just the forgiven, but the forgiver as well. As the celebration continued around her, Adana looked up at the star-filled sky and whispered a thank you to Mama Zuri, wherever she might be, for it was her kindness, all those years ago that had set Adana on this path. A path that had led her through pain and triumph, through heartbreak and success, and finally back home, to where it all began. In that moment, under the vast African sky, surrounded by the joy of a village reborn, Adana knew that her story was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning.